Dead Cells may no longer be doing content updates, but that doesn't mean that you can't find new ways to play the game. You may already have hundreds or thousands of hours in the game, and you might be beating it every single time, but today I'm going to give you some new ways to make the game even harder if that's something that might be interesting to you. These difficulty changes I'm going to offer you work on both PC, console, and mobile, except for some of the last ones that you'll want to see at the end of this list. First, let's start off with some easy stuff. This is all things that you can change in the custom mode options in Dead Cells. If you think about Dead Cells, it's one of the only action roguelike games where the player is given a health potion. It's probably more of a callback to like a Soulsborne style game, because I believe Castlevania doesn't even have health potions in it. You're typically healing off of food that is in the walls or drops off of monsters, or you can buy it from a shop. So in Dead Cells, you can do the same thing. The very first option in custom mode is to change the maximum number of health pots. You can start off with your full and then bring it down to where you're comfortable. You can go all the way down to 0 if you really want to, and that way whatever healing you have has to come from monsters in the biome. Don't forget that every map in the game has at least one piece of food in the wall and one piece of food that drops from a monster. So even if you have health potions turned off, it is still possible to heal purely from gameplay alone. Another major component to getting stronger in Dead Cells is the Legendary Forge. On 5BC, you can turn in enough cells so that every item in the game drops at S tier quality. However, when we go back to custom mode, we have options to change the percent of objects with quality plus, 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 and S. S being the maximum, of course. Of course, you can change the values of these as much as you want, but I'm sure you want to know how impactful is it to have the difference between plus, 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 and S. So let's take a look at a basic broadsword. If you look at this is a level 1 broadsword, has no blacksmith upgrades to it at all. It has a regular crit DPS of 281. As we increase the quality of it, you can see below the DPS number there's a +% damage. That's on pretty much every item you're going to see in the game, and you may not know what that does, but what the game's telling you is that this is 33% better than a base value broadsword. As you go up, it becomes 66%, and then at S rank, it jumps way up to 125%, more than double the damage of a base broadsword. What does that look like in practical sense? Let's grab the level 1 broadsword, and if I spawn this mushroom, for me to kill it, it requires me to do the full combo. If we compare that to the S rank version, which is 125% more, the end result looks something like this. Now it's only 2 hits to kill, because if you think about it, we have doubled our damage, so rather than killing in 3, we can kill in only 2, or 1.5 for that matter. So the difference between running through a biome with only plus gear or plus gear is a maximum of half of your damage is gone. You can kind of see, even though I'm using a plus item, essentially just one upgrade over its default, I'm still able to kill things. They just don't die as quickly as they normally do. Essentially, it's a way to help the monsters fight back when they normally can't defend themselves. This is also a fun way to get more use out of the gold that you generate, because if you have items that need to be upgraded, for example, this blood sword can go from plus to plus, but it costs me almost all the gold that I collected in the first biome. Or if you really want to, you can just remove the upgrade NPC too. That way you're stuck with whatever the version of the weapons are that you decide on. That is called the Minor Forge, and you can disable it right here. Another cool thing you can fiddle around with is the shops. If you're as deep in the game as I am, you can do a pretty good job of getting the builds you want, thanks to the way how the shops are set up. If you look at my shop, I have the choice between a brutality, tactics, or survival shop, or random. Now, of course, you can just hit the random button, and that way you can have a randomized selection of everything from every color. But if you want to do it in a more official way, you can turn off that shop selection by turning off the merchandise categories upgrade that you have. This is something that came from the graveyard level. If you don't have this, then just ignore everything I'm saying. But if you do have it, turn this off, and that way it'll change your shop so that it will only ever generate random items. So now I don't have to press that random button. I can just come in here and it's automatically every item in the game. And then the refresh button does exactly what you think it does. Rerolls anything from any color. If you think about it, this is a roguelite game, so the more randomization for your loadout, the harder, and maybe the better. At least I like to think it might be kind of interesting. Another cool idea is for all my 5BC players out there. Those of you in 5BC or not would know that malaise is a system that's introduced in 5BC. The malaise is a disease that all of the monsters and maybe the people too of the island are afflicted with. As you play through one of the biomes, the malaise counter is going up in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. The malaise itself does quite a bit of awful things to you. At maximum level, the enemies move faster, they're more reactive to your movements, they teleport to you, they deal more damage, they can transform into elites, enemies will spawn around you, and enemies teleport and bring others with them that usually don't teleport. You would typically reduce your malaise counter by clearing enemies that are on the map. You can see that every time I kill an enemy, the counter goes down little by little. Not a lot because I'm sitting at 10 malaise right now, but every monster kill does count. But funny enough, the malaise counter is actually locked with your in-game timer. So if you look at my screen right now, I just started up a new run. My timer is paused because I'm in the beginning of the game. However, if you change your gameplay settings from timer default to timer permanent, you can see my malaise is instantly starting to go up. And that's because as the timer is moving, our malaise bar is moving too. Now, the normal way to stop your malaise is to clear out all the enemies on the map. The counter will still stop when there's no monsters left on the map, so there's no way to make that continue without resorting to mods. But this is a clever way to keep the malaise pressure up. As you see, even while I'm paused, my malaise counter was going up during the pause screen. This also happens when you're in a chest room, or if you're in a challenge rift, the malaise counter will still be going up. At any time, if you were to pause the timer going back to default, the malaise bar stops going up, and it will go up once you leave whatever area you're paused in. You can also set that in custom mode over by the default timers. Permanent timer is here and allows you to do it without having to resort to pressing the pause menu. So with all those settings, you're still pretty much used to how Dead Cells flows anyway. Even with the loss of your health pots, with the malaise always ticking, or with items that have been nerfed, the monster layout is still pretty much the same. The game doesn't offer a ton of options to do anything about that, but what you do have access to are some custom mode modifiers that will actually add monsters to every biome. For example, Hitchcock will add random bats. Those include both the buzz cutters and the kamikaze bats. For anyone that plays this game regularly, you would know that kamikaze bats and buzz cutters are not enemies that you want to see in high amounts. And sometimes the game will spawn a bunch of these next to each other. If you imagine fighting those on top of a failed experiment or rampager, it starts to add up quite a bit of pressure where you normally wouldn't have. Sharpshooter adds a pair of inquisitors everywhere. This one I find to be especially awful because the inquisitors always spawn in pairs. I don't really know why that is, but you'll end up dodging so many bullets at once that even veteran players will know that this is not something you ever want to see. You can also turn on spikers, the mushrooms that try to stab you through the floor in maps like the sewers. This one can be particularly nasty because they do aggro you from pretty far away. And on a map that you wouldn't expect the mushroom to show up, that might change how quickly you have to get to the next platform. Fog adds a monster called the Masker, which only shows up in a very little amount of biomes throughout Dead Cells. And even though the Masker doesn't directly attack you, it does one thing that is deceptively evil in Dead Cells, and that is to cover up your visibility of the screen. So right now, you can see that there is a Masker here that spawned in prison quarters. But as you see on this platform, there's something else walking with the Masker. Now I know that this is a Demolisher. I'm gonna go up and see the rocket launcher firing monster, but then above the Masker, there's something else, and I have no idea what it is. I actually don't know. It's a Rampager, and then a Masker on top of that. Luckily, the Elite is immune, but if there's anything else on top of the Masker, I'm not gonna know until I go up here. So I think it's a really cool way to add sort of like a fog of war to the game. You can still kind of rush towards the next area, but you have to keep in mind that there's something possibly on that platform that you can't know about and you'll have to react to on the fly. If you're feeling really gutsy, you can turn on Follow the Light, which adds the Forgotten Sepulchre darkness to every biome in the game. This one I don't usually recommend because long ago we had multiple instances of no light spawning in certain areas. I believe the devs have done quite a bit of work over the last few years to make sure that darkness is preventable. Even while I'm picking up my items from the tubes, there's no light here. I have to quickly move forward, and I didn't get light until much later. I actually took a little bit of damage, not enough to really cry about, but it gives you an idea of sometimes there just isn't light in a convenient space, which I suppose is part of the challenge in general, but still I wouldn't recommend it unless you're someone who doesn't mind dying quite a bit, especially to something that you almost have no control over. Keep in mind that every elite in the game will drop light, and then every secret that's in a wall will also drop light. There's actually a bunch more things you can do to make the game harder using the in-game settings that are available to you. Here's a look at my personal options that I like to call 21 BC. I have health potions reduced, gold reserves, which is the money you get from a previous run, is turned off. My recycling is turned off, so I cannot sell any of the items that show up. That severely changes the economy of the game, and every cent matters. I have the curse level on chests turned up to 15. I of course have my percentages turned off. No S ranks, but we're walking around with ++. Minor Forge is disabled, so I cannot level up that ++ item into an S. For my 5BC players, health potions actually restore your malaise, and I turned that off, as well as adding the fact that food can now be more infected than before. I have the fog on that I was talking about earlier, but then I also turned on monsters that hit you will poison you, causing you to take additional damage, and when they die, they drop a bomb where they were killed. Now that leaves one more piece that is only going to work for my PC players out there. This is what I was calling 6BC. We were changing the health and the damage that monsters deal to the players. In assist mode, you can turn down the amount of enemy health and the amount of enemy damage. That way you have an easier time to get through the game. But on PC, if you head over to your Steam launcher, you can find your Dead Cells files under installed files. If you take a look at your save folder, there's a single file in here called dcoptions.json. You can get a nice notepad version of various options menu settings that are in Dead Cells. This is basically what you would find in the main menu or when you press pause. We can actually find assist mode in this notepad, and in here we have trap damage, enemy health, and enemy damage. Trap damage you can increase, but currently in the game there's a 30% maximum life dealt to the player if they go into a trap. So no matter what number you set that to, it will only ever be 30% damage taken. Now these values are out of 100, so 1 counts as 100, 1.5 counts as 150, and then 2 counts as 200. So if I do something like this, 1.5, 2, and 3, we're actually adding slightly more trap damage, double the health of enemies, and triple the damage that they deal. We can save that, and now with assist mode turned on, we can see my trap is 150, enemy health is 200, and enemy damage is 300%. What does 200% health look like? Well, let's take that broadsword experiment I had earlier. I'm gonna go ahead and grab a 1S broadsword. This becomes much worse on bosses, where you can clearly see the difference between a double HP concierge, which is what I just showed there, and a 100% HP concierge. Look at the damage difference between two full combos. For damage dealt to the player, right now I'm sitting with a pretty conservative stat line, 3, 3, and 15. That's something that you would typically expect to see by concierge. One triple damage hit does about half my HP. I also have the poison damage added, so just forget that you saw that part. If you compare that to a normal hit from concierge, we definitely don't lose half my HP in one hit. Even with the poison, it is a much more bearable number. Currently, I have not found a way to do that in-game. I can only do it by changing the files, which is why this is only going to work on PC. If anyone happens to figure out a way to do that without resorting to file changes, definitely let me know. And there you have it. Multiple ways to up the difficulty in Dead Cells. I know the game is hard, but by the time you reach 1,000 hours, you might be looking for ways to sort of freshen it up a little bit. And these are really cool ideas that I like to implement whenever I want to do my boss cell climbing videos. If you want to see those in action, here's a couple on the screen right now. If you have other ideas to make Dead Cells even harder, leave a comment letting me know what ones you're using. Like the video, subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.